My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. Good evening. Tomorrow, a wet and windy one for large parts of the UK. We do have
Jacinda Trudeau and the rest of the gang are on the beach at Bali for the G20. Their hapless subjects are getting shafted in almost every conceivable way from, what is this, the worst inflation in 40 years to all these tax increases that are supposed to be coming tomorrow, the dead parrot health service to the vaccine mandates unto the grave, incoming Albanians treated with more respect than loyal Ulstermen. We're going to get to it all tonight with Kate Hoey, Toby Young, Ben Sixsmith and Annette Lewis, a Canadian lady with an appalling story to tell. Plus, of course, the most important part of the show, would you like to be on the beach at Bali with Rishi and Jacinda and Emmanuel? Or would you rather be on the beach at Dover with the Albanian sex traffickers? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at gbnews. It's all coming up after Polly Middlehurst with the latest news. Over to you, Polly.
Mark, thanks very much indeed, and good evening to you. Our top story on GB News tonight, Downing Street says the Prime Minister still has the full confidence in his deputy despite complaints made against him. Dominic Raab has insisted that he's behaved professionally after an investigation has been launched into 2 formal complaints about his conduct. Mr Raab, who requested the independent inquiry himself, told Mr Sunak he never tolerated bullying and will continue in his role as Justice Secretary and Lord Chancellor. The Foreign Minister says the UK won't be rushing into judgment about a missile which exploded in Poland until it has the full details. James cleverly wants to wait for Poland to establish what happened first, saying the UK's response will always be led by the facts. It comes as 2 people were killed after a missile landed in eastern Poland near the Ukrainian border. But Mr Cleverly added the incident was the result of Russia's aggression towards Ukraine.
Putin launched one of the heaviest attacks since the war began, firing wave upon wave of more than 80 missiles at Ukrainian cities, obliterating homes of ordinary families, destroying critical national infrastructure, and depriving millions of Ukrainians of power and heat just as winter sets in. This brutal air campaign is Putin's revenge for Ukraine's successes on the battlefield.
Rail workers have voted overwhelmingly to continue with their strike action, and it could go on for another 6 months. Under employment law, the RMT had to reballot its members 6 months after a previous vote. 91% of union members across both Network Rail and 14 separate train operating companies have voted to carry on taking industrial action. It's their long-running disputes over pay and conditions. Inflation rose to 11.1% last month. The ONS says that's up from 10.1% in September. The CPI measure showed that rising gas and electricity prices, as well as increasing food costs, has driven inflation to its highest level for over 40 years. Royal Naval Shipbuilding is returning to Belfast, with the new site pledging to create 2,000 UK jobs. The MOD has commissioned the building of 3 support ships in a contract worth over £1.5 billion. Each vessel will measure the length of 2 Premier League football pitches, and their final assembly will take place at a shipyard in Belfast. Now take a look at this. Third time lucky for NASA this morning after 2 previous failed attempts. Artemis 1 made liftoff.
And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
If you're watching on TV, you can see a rocket lifting into the night sky. It's a crewless rocket blasting off from Cape Canaveral in Florida early this morning for a 3-week test journey around the moon and all the way back again. It's part of NASA's plans to return astronauts to the lunar surface as early as 2025. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Mark Steyn.
Yeah, back to the moon. Sign me up for that. It can't be worse than the way it is down here. Thank you very much, Polly. Once upon a time, British Prime Ministers were mocked if they spent too much time enjoying pointless international summits at sun-drenched vacation resorts. Here is the late Jim Callaghan casting an appreciative eye over a bikinied young lovely on the beach at Guadeloupe in 1979. Meanwhile, back in Britain, and do stop me if you've heard this before, everything was falling apart. And in those days, Fleet Street knew what to make of Jim Callaghan in the Caribbean in his bathing shorts. There's a famous Sun headline. Crisis, what crisis? Rail, lorry, jobs chaos. Well, let's see, the railways are on strike, as are the nurses. The lorries are all full of Albanians who can't get a dinghy. Jobs chaos, another 500,000 people have quit the workforce because of so-called long-term sickness. Meanwhile, our new Prime Minister carries on his world tour. He started at COP27, where he agreed to pay climate reparations in mitigation for Britain's great gift to the planet of the Industrial Revolution, while he was enjoying the delights of the Egyptian resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. He then moved on to the G20 at Bali. These things are always at Bali, aren't they? Never in Oldham or West Bromwich. After COP27 and the G20, it's the COP20 in Tahiti and the G27 in Aruba, so no time to visit, say, England or Scotland or Northern Ireland or Wales. Last night it was karaoke night at the G20, and they decided before they brought the Pfizer guy on to announce the new trivalent vaccine you only need to take twice a week, that they'd all do Elvis in blue Hawaii. Here they guys, look at these guys here. There's Elvis. And the G20 lads climbed into the old Hawaiian shirts to warble Can't Help Falling in Love with You. As you can see from the admiring expression on Jacinda Trudeau's face, Rishi Rich is absolutely killing it there. Yeah, he totally nailed it.
Wise men say only fools rush in.
Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help imposing ruinous lockdown and furlough schemes and paying people to go to Burger King and tossing £500 billion into the Thames and watching it float out to sea. Klaus Schwab, the sinister Teutonic megalomaniac, hiding in plain sight as a sinister Teutonic megalomaniac wearing a Hawaiian shirt, doesn't seem to be enjoying the performance as much as Monsieur Trudeau. He preferred Chairman Xi serenading Jacinda Trudeau with, "If you're looking for trouble, you've come to the right place. If you're looking for trouble, look right in my face." That's Chairman Xi tearing a strip of Justin. Look at this sad little scene after he's been told off by Chairman Xi. There's Justin Trudeau just walking off into the wings. Chairman Xi was berating him for leaking details of their convo, and there's no doubt who's the boss man in that exchange. Given the wreckage all around on the home front, from the NHS to tonight's intake of asylum seekers, how can even Rishi Rich think this is a good look for him? How can Jacinda Trudeau think it's a good look for him, or whatever his pronoun is? We have a Canadian on the show tonight who has literally been condemned to death by the Mammy Singer's lunatic public health regime. In the United Kingdom, the so-called Conservative and Unionist government has inflicted the biggest single act of vandalism on the Union ever. Baroness Hoey is here on that. And if you're figuring the next generation of Tories will be along soon to sort all this out, are you entirely confident there's going to be a next generation of Tories? Ben Sixsmith has some thoughts on that, and on the breezy insouciance with which our leaders are trying to arrange the ultimate diversion of a third world war. I know lockdown was bad, but like walking us into nuclear Armageddon to distract us from it seems a bit extreme. First, though, climate change. Is there anything it can't do? All spring, summer, autumn, we have had excess deaths in the UK and the rest of the developed world. We're very curious about the cause of all these extra corpses, but officialdom has had very little to say about this until Dame Jenny Harris. She was made a dame at the beginning of the year for her services to track and trace. Dame Jenny, head of the UK Health Security Agency, says this large mountain of dead bodies is due to climate change. Toby Young is the founder of the Daily Skeptic website, where you can read all about Dame Jenny, and also of the Free Speech Union. This is beyond pathetic. It was hot for 3 days, but we've had excess mortality for getting on for 7-8 months now.
Yes, I mean, it's almost like a parody. Rather than a serious explanation. Yeah, as you say, excess deaths have been running high since last April, and they're continuing to run high. There were more than 900 excess deaths per week on average in October. So they both predate and postdate what, as you point out, was a fairly short heat wave. So the idea that climate change is responsible, the hot weather is responsible for these excess deaths, is just for the birds. And as we know, actually, we are, in terms of lives saved, we're net beneficiaries from climate change. According to the Office for National Statistics figures, many more people survived in the past 20 years as a result of the milder winters than died as a result of slightly warmer summers. So, you know, we are net beneficiaries of the fractionally small rise in average temperatures.
Aren't you making the mistake, just in pointing that out, which is true, but aren't you making the mistake of treating this ridiculous claim seriously? I mean, at a certain point, I mean, it's about as basic as it can get. If you turn to government for everything, as people do these days, well, the government not having anything to say about large numbers of dead people is about as basic as it gets. And when they come up with, there were 3 hot days and it's caused 9 months of excess, what is that? Like the heat wave version of long COVID? It'll get you, the hot day will get you 4 months down the line. I mean, why? At a certain point, you just have to, this is not even up to the level of bureaucratic official nonsense.
Yes, I mean, it does seem to be taking us for fools. I mean, I'm not particularly impressed by the more conventional explanation for the number of excess deaths this year, which is to do with delays and backlogs in the NHS, the fact that there's a waiting list of over 7.5 million for elective surgery. Lots of people didn't go to hospital in order to protect the NHS, so conditions which could have been nipped in the bud have got worse and killed them, and so on and so forth. That, of course, may be a factor. But the elephant in the room, the thing we're not allowed to discuss, is the possible role that the mRNA vaccines have been playing in causing excess deaths. Now, we know that the COVID vaccines can cause heart problems, they can cause blood clotting problems. A lot of the excess deaths have been due to heart conditions, heart attacks. Now, there's no disagreement, I don't think. There's no kind of controversy about whether the vaccines cause heart problems and blood clotting problems. The controversy is, the thing people disagree about is, well, how prevalent are those problems? Are they very rare adverse effects of the mRNA vaccines, or are they possibly responsible, in part at least, for this wave of excess deaths? We're not allowed to talk about that.
You're being the soul of generosity there when you say there's no dispute that there are still people who are wedded to the fairy tale of late 2020 when these things were announced, and they were miracle drugs, and they would prevent you getting the disease and prevent you passing it on. And as you say, that story has shifted. At some point, because it goes across Europe, it's North America, Australia and New Zealand, which had low COVID deaths, have had terrible excess mortality since they began vaccinating people. At what point do these guys at G20 say, you know, maybe this is something we should be talking about instead of sea levels in the Maldives?
I think it's they will strain every sinew not to talk about it, to avoid that subject. I think the people at the G20, the kind of global cognitive ruling elite, they want to take credit for having rescued us from this deadly pandemic, because they got behind the development of these miraculous vaccines. They rolled out these vaccines. They've saved the planet. That is the source now of their authority. They can't really expect people, I think, to trust them to get things right because of their expertise, their supposedly high intelligence, because they keep making fundamental mistakes. But I think that they've now kind of gone all in on we saved the planet with these wonder drugs. So they're very reluctant, I think, to accept any possibility that they might actually be killing people.
Let me ask you about another topic before you take off, because I'm fascinated at how this stuff just keeps going on. The universities are being told they have to decolonize their curricula, which means, I take it, that you can't teach that the British Empire was the best thing that happened to the world, and if you had the good fortune to be incorporated within Her Majesty's dominions, life looked up for you compared to almost all the alternatives. Apparently that's a controversial position these days.
Yeah, no, this is actually a great story. It was a story in the Mail. So QAA, the Quality Assurance Agency, has
what is that?
It's a charity funded by universities. It gets over £1 million of taxpayers' money a year to produce advice about what courses universities should be teaching, so they can be of a global standard, gold-plated courses. And let me just tell you what some of the bizarre things they've recommended. They've said that computing courses should address how, quote, hierarchies of colonial value are reinforced in computing. They've said about language courses.
Wait a minute. I don't think they had computers in the British Empire. That was one of the great things about it. You couldn't go on Twitter in Basuto land.
Yeah, it's bizarre. They've said language courses. So from now on, universities are told they need to encourage students to reflect on, quote, this is when learning Spanish, French, German, quote, historical and contemporary forms of injustice and inequality related to imperialism, colonialism, class or gender divisions. I mean, it is extraordinary. They're effectively telling universities, you know, whatever course students choose to study, they're going to get critical race theory. Like Henry Ford's line about, it doesn't matter what colour you paint the door, so long as it's black.
Right. And that's the thing. It's all right if they do it with these, you know, phony subjects like transgender studies or whatever, once they're doing it in physics, then at a certain point, planes are going to be dropping out of the sky from this kind of thing.
It's all part of the decolonisation agenda. Mathematics, science, computer science, they all have to be decolonised according to these kind of woke fanatics. I mean, not realising actually that in kind of propagating this cult, they are illustrating the fact that their minds have been colonised by American grievance studies departments.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. It's American racial grievance politics imposed on the rest of the planet that on the whole doesn't share that experience.
That's the real form of colonialism, and it's unfolding right in front of their noses.
And it's interesting, actually, when you look at the protests in Hong Kong, where they're protesting against some serious colonisation, and they're all waving their little British red ensigns from colonial Hong Kong. They'd love to be recolonised, a recolonisation agenda. Thank you very much, Toby. Let me know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk. And Lady Hoey is here on the damage to the Union from the Northern Ireland Protocol. We also have Ben Sixsmith on young Conservatives, who are such an endangered species. I'm surprised David Attenborough isn't calling for action at COP27. Plus, you won't have the vaccine? No organ transplant for you then. But don't touch that dial. You never know what you'll find lurking on some of these other channels. We're coming right back.
The Chancellor has a problem. He's got £55 billion to find, and it could soon become your problem too. Tax rises and cuts could be coming, but where will the axe fall? Benefits and pensions, support for energy bills, or social care? To find out what it means for you and your family, the Chancellor's autumn statement, live here on GB News tomorrow from 10 a.m.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. And now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
GB News is the People's channel, so let's channel the people. They're still talking about net zero at the G20. Do you think the Tories should put a sock in it about that? Ian says they should delay and put more effort into the planning and the impact on the people. And stop fueling the catastrophe narrative. It's not a catastrophe narrative at this stage, Ian. It is actually a catastrophe for the people. Anonymous Coward says, if we abandon net zero, otters will drown. What kind of monster wants otters to drown? I love otters. My son was a kind of otter fetishist when he was a little boy, and so and there's tons of otters. Actually, there's otters all over. Otters are dropping off the trees. The otter has no problem. You have the problem. The otter's doing fine. The otter at this stage is this shy of having offshore accounts in Guernsey and the Cayman Islands. He's doing great. Darren says, clearly Mark has already made up his mind if that's the way he's asking the question, so why bother to join him? Loaded questions are the essence of all public discourse in the United Kingdom media. You should know that, Darren. Jack says, yes, 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 but they never will. So I'm afraid the country will have to abandon the Tories. Over at the G20, Rishi Sunak has promised Joe Biden that an agreement with the EU over the Northern Ireland Protocol will be sorted by the 25th anniversary of the Belfast Agreement next year, so it won't spoil old Joe's transatlantic photo op. Apparently, Mr. Biden's political needs take precedence over the interests of the people of Northern Ireland. They've been debating the protocol in the House of Lords, and here's what my next guest had to say there.
Unionists and loyalists in Northern Ireland have been, over the years, betrayed by Conservative and Labour governments again and again. Their courage in times of war, fighting for the UK, 40 years of terrible, terrible terrorism, and their loyalty has been rewarded by being treated like second-class citizens, with constant appeasement to the Irish government and those who are dedicated to destroying the Union and the very birthright of Unionists to live as equal citizens under the protection of His Majesty's government. Betrayed during the Home Rule crisis, betrayed after the First World War, betrayed in 1985, and indeed many, many more now in Northern Ireland, sadly, are feeling that even in the 1998 agreement, the Unionist community were deceived. That is partly why many of us are determined to get rid of those injustices and ensure that what was promised by the sovereign government of this country to its British citizens in Northern Ireland is upheld. And, of course, the final betrayal was the Northern Ireland Protocol, when it was said that no British Prime Minister could allow a border in the Irish Sea. And yet we saw what happened. When such a border was put there, subjugating Northern Ireland and its citizens, it was a historic wrong.
Baroness Hoey in the House of Lords, not the friendliest venue for an Ulster Unionist these days. Lady Hoey joins me now. That's a huge... You go back to Irish Home Rule in the teens of the last century and trace a variety of historical incidents culminating in the protocol, which has actually created a united Ireland from a commercial trade point of view.
Yes, and it's very much what the Irish have wanted, and lots of people have thought, you know, if we can get Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, to be an economically united, isn't it going to make it a lot easier to make it a united Ireland? And, you know, the protocol was the kind of, I suppose, for some people, the icing on the cake of how you could do that. And now we're separated more and more. We've got foreign laws telling us what we can do in trading arrangements, and we've got a foreign court. And our Parliament and our country has allowed that to happen.
Well, no disrespect to your fellow peers, but in a certain sense, you've got a foreign House of Lords, because there's hundreds and hundreds of members of the House of Lords these days, and a big bunch of them are basically hardcore Remainers.
Oh, the House of Lords is packed full of Remainers, people who were either in the diplomatic service or were in the civil service or lawyers, and they love something like the Protocol Bill, which is designed to try and retreat a bit from what the government did with the withdrawal agreement. But they will decimate it when it comes to report stage. It will go then back to the Commons, and Rishi Sunak will have to make up his mind. Is he serious about bringing Northern Ireland back as a fully integral part of the United Kingdom, or is he prepared to allow the unelected Lords to completely demolish what the commitment was?
Well, in a sense, never mind the House of Lords, never mind Brussels. Why is he giving an undertaking on one of the home nations of the UK to Joe Biden?
This relationship, this special relationship we have with America, has all American presidents, practically all, have had a kind of Irish mystique about Ireland. You know, the idea that somehow this romanticised idea of Ireland, and I'm afraid Biden is the worst of all. And we seem to play along with that. But we play along with it not just with America, we play along with it with the Irish government, don't we? I mean, the Irish diaspora have every single right in this country that you know, I have as born and bred in the United Kingdom, and no one ever says anything about that. They could vote in our referendum. They can vote in our elections. We have allowed the Irish to practically be part of the United Kingdom, only pretending that they're, you know, an independent country, but they're not really an independent country because they're in the European Union.
Well, you're letting it all hang out now, but you might as well, because the whole thing about Irish independence is that you know, they want to pretend to be foreign, and London said, OK, we'll go along with that, but we're not. In law, you won't. That's actually the way the whatever it is, the Irish Bill of 1949 puts it. So the Irish will not be foreigners under UK law. At what point does somebody have to give something back? You know, we're now having things like, we're not going to give Dublin lawmaking powers over Northern Ireland, and we're supposed to be reassured by that?
That's the idea about giving joint authority because the Assembly's not happening, and that had to be forced out of the Secretary of State after a couple of days of the Northern Ireland office pretending that they didn't really want to make a comment on it. Finally, they said, we're not going to have joint authority. I mean, it is outrageous. And it's out. What is more outrageous, I think, and makes me very angry, is the ignorance, or whether deliberate or not, of politicians in this country who kind of let the Irish government get away with it, let our own government get away with it, and don't ever speak out. Now, we're going to the Supreme Court in 2 weeks' time on the protocol, that it's actually illegal, that it's breaking the Act of Union. And we will probably have our own government lawyers coming in, costing a fortune, and arguing, you know, that Northern Ireland is special because of the Belfast Agreement, and yet the Belfast Agreement, Good Friday Agreement, as we know, has been broken by it.
Yeah. Well, that's absolute. And as I read that bit, if you read the Act of Union, it says that there will the state will not distinguish between His Majesty's subjects in Great Britain and His Majesty's subjects in Ireland. Why is that capable of being nuanced by clever lawyers when it's absolutely black and white?
Well, when we went to court first in Northern Ireland, this High Court in Northern Ireland, the Appeal Court, actually said that we were right, that the Act was being subjugated, the Act of Union was being subjugated, but it was agreed to by Parliament. Parliament had impliedly agreed it. And so this will be ultimately the Supreme Court is going to have to judge this. And maybe if we're lucky, and it would need a great deal of luck, we hope we will have it, they would rule that Parliament would actually have to go back and vote for this, because when people voted for the withdrawal agreement, they certainly didn't think they were voting to subjugate the active union. I mean, the active union is the union.
Yeah.
And that's Scotland as well. So it's not just...
That's absolutely critical. The active union is the British state.
Yes.
1801. And you can't... And if they say you can just impliedly repeal bits and pieces of it, then there is no union.
They tried to say that, members of Parliament are so clever and important and so on that they must have known what they were doing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we know that. But then we had that ridiculous thing today about the... our court case, bundle of court coming over from the Supreme Court to our lawyers in Northern Ireland was held up because of the protocol for 7 days in Belfast Customs. Now, isn't that ironic?
This is what's happened here. This is basically a piece of mail in the mails.
Quite big, admittedly.
A big one, but it's basically a package your postman would deliver. And if you send it now from London to Belfast, it gets held up in Euro customs for a week. I mean, I find I find it shameful that the government in London agreed to this. But I also find it pitiful that Irish nationalism is at such a low in Dublin that they basically need the European Union to sneak through Irish union. Because I tell you, De Valera and Arthur Griffith and those old school guys would be turning in their Irish nationalist graves. Thank you very much, Kate. Keep up the fight. These are your fellow British citizens, and they're being manoeuvred out of the union through the incompetence of the Brexit agreement and the duplicitousness of the Europeans on this. Coming up, can the state condemn you to death for refusing to get vaccinated? Annette Lewis has a terrifying tale, and that's straight ahead on GB News. See you in a minute.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking. My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
All year long, we've told the stories of those injured or killed by the COVID jabs. To put it at its mildest, it's incontestable that there are some people to whom these shots do more harm than good, and for that reason, getting it should be your choice. Yet His Majesty's government, here and elsewhere, insisted that you had to be jabbed to keep your job. The United States government is still insisting that foreigners have to be jabbed and boosted to fly to Disneyland. Jabs for jobs and junkets is one thing, but Justin Trudeau's Canada is taking it to the next level. In Alberta, Annette Lewis is terminally ill and needs an organ transplant to save her life. But under the rules of the health service, she can't get it unless she gets the COVID jab. She got a lawyer and fought it in the Court of Queen's Bench, as it then was. She lost because Mr. Justice Belzile ruled that the standard of care must be the same for all potential recipients, or it could result in, quote, medical chaos. That's actually very disturbing judicial reasoning. So Annette took it to the Alberta Court of Appeal, which a few days ago upheld the ban on her transplant in an even more expansive ruling. Quote, being vaccinated against COVID-19 is a necessary component of proper medical care for individuals. Really? It's not so in most countries. Annette Lewis joins me now. Annette, are you keeping the legal battle going? Can you take it to the Supreme Court in Canada?
Well, right now, excuse me, right now we're deciding whether to do that, whether to go that extra step. My lawyer is consulting with her colleagues whether to do that, if they can do that, and you know, if it's even worth going there. I think it is, and no, I shouldn't say worth going there, but they're gonna consult with the colleague she is to see if that's her next step, going to the Supreme Court of Canada. I'm hoping
you're in a terrible situation because Canada is different from the United Kingdom in that you don't have a public and a private health service. So when the public health service says you can't have the transplant, there's nowhere else to go in the entire Dominion of Canada, basically.
Correct. It's if they say no, then it's no. There's nowhere else to go unless you take it to another country, which there's no option right now for that. There's no option. If I could, I would.
So if you could just get on a plane and, say, fly to somewhere where they'd be willing to perform the operation, you would, or give you the transplant, you would do that?
Oh, in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat, I would, yes. But right now, that's not even on the table.
Were you surprised by the hostility of the judges? I mean, both in the Court of King's Bench and in the Court of Appeal, the judges basically seem to think that the health service has the right to impose uniform conditions on every single patient.
I was really disappointed and upset, yes. But I was really disappointed in their decisions because I don't think, in my belief is, I don't think they have the right to tell somebody that it's not my choice what I put in my body, and it is my choice. And The thing is about that ruling is, I got to be careful what I say. With that ruling, it was under the charter. The charter, the Canadian Bill of Rights is what protects Canadian citizens against something like this. And the Canadian Bill of Rights should have been used in this court case. I didn't know a whole lot about it with the charter or the Canadian Bill of Rights. The charter has loopholes in it, which we all know, that it can be changed. So the rules can be changed. The government can change the rules, more or less. But the Canadian Bill of Rights, they cannot change those rules. John D. Diefenbaker, when he made that in 1960, it was to protect the Canadian citizens. And it was life, liberty.
When you look at, I'm well familiar with that, Annette. But when you look at what I find odd is basically the way Canada now has an extreme and, in your case, potentially fatal definition of your rights. If you look, for example, at Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, they've all recently actually said they're not recommending these vaccines to people under 60, under 50, under 30, because the vaccines are at worst useless and at best lethal. Why is it that Canada are so fanatical about saying unless you get the vaccines, you can't have your hernia dealt with in a Canadian hospital? It's bonkers.
You tell me. Canada is the only government that I know of around the globe, in a lot of countries. Canada is the worst one saying you must still get this jab or vaccine. I don't call it a vaccine. It's still in clinical trials. It's still in the third phase, and they're still being tested whether it's safe and effective. In my case, even though the courts have a gag on me because I'm not allowed to talk about the Pacific Oregon or the doctors' names or the name of the hospital. So I wasn't very pleased about that, because they're limiting me, which is the person that is subject to death because of the ruling that come down. But they also put a gag order on me, and I can't even talk about it. So it's like, you wonder what made the courts decide this. And it wasn't just because people were calling in on my behalf to the doctors. That's what they claimed. Whether it happened or not, I don't know. But it's not safe and effective. We all know that now. It's not science. If it come down to the science part of it's saying that they're not safe.
Let me ask you about that, Annette, because you've got a ticking clock. Every month that passes while this is tied up in the courts, and this is why the Supreme Court of Canada should actually take it instantly. Every month that passes is getting worse for you. I mean, to be brutal about this, how long do you have to persuade the Canadian courts to change their mind and allow you to have this transplant?
Not long. Believe me, it's not long at all. And if I was to take my hose off my face, right now my body is not taking in its own oxygen. If I was to take this hose off my face, within 2 minutes, I would probably pass out. Because my numbers, my oxygen my numbers drop.
Well, this is why. No, it's a terrible situation. I cannot believe this. This is my native land. It is the senior dominion of the Commonwealth, and they are actually now ordering, sentencing people to death because they won't go along with the fetishization of these stupid non-vaccines. Thank you very much, Annette. Good luck. You are going to need it. And I would like the Supreme Court of Canada to I don't want Justin Trudeau's vaccine fetishization to actually start killing more people than it's already killed. Thank you very much, Annette. What a terrible situation. Condemned to a vaccine mandate unto death. This is the world we're building. Steyn looms, and are you hot for World War III? The media's up for it. Ben Sixsmith is next on The Mark Steyn Show. See you in a couple of minutes.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
and online. We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
On your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
As we went on air yesterday, news broke of 2 dead Poles killed by a missile strike in Poland, about 4 miles from the Ukrainian border. A Russian missile? Time to invoke NATO Article 5? Well, actually, it's looking more like a Ukrainian missile. Ben Sixsmith lives in Poland, and the Western media's breeziness about World War III comes across a little different when you're that close to the action. Ben, it was slightly weird 24 hours ago. It was almost as if the media were panting for this to escalate.
Yeah, it was quite extraordinary. I think several newspapers splashed across their front pages that it was a Russian missile that had struck Poland on the basis of no evidence except for one anonymous American source. And then very quickly this morning, they had to shift gears because politicians began releasing statements which suggested that it was in fact a Ukrainian missile which had been intended to intercept Russian attacks and sadly flown over the border into Poland. So I think editors were thinking much more in terms of sales than in terms of World War.
Are you surprised, though, at the way things keep happening that could very easily tip us into a world war? I'm just thinking of the destruction of the pipelines in the Baltic, even the assassination of an oligarch's daughter that the Americans now say the Ukrainians did. For some reason, there seem to be forces at play that want this thing to spread beyond Ukraine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, anytime a nation is at war, it's keen to attract support from outside its borders. I think British people can look back to World War II and find a lot of interesting information about how we used propaganda to encourage, let's say, the Americans to join the war on our side.
Yep.
And of course, we can understand Ukrainians will want to encourage us to join the war on their side. But just because we can empathize with that, it doesn't necessarily mean it's in our interests or even their interests for us to do so. So anytime there's a kind of mysterious event, we should at least be skeptical about what might lie behind it.
And the motivations. I want to ask you about this because you wrote an interesting piece the other day about young conservatives. Tomorrow, as you know, Mr. Sunak's ministry will do their so-called autumn statement. And whatever it does to the old and the middle-aged, it seems likely that young people, including young conservatives, will get more and more screwed by what's happening. You wrote an interesting piece that basically what makes you conservative is you get to buy your own home and you have kids, and both those things are now out of reach for large numbers of young Britons.
Yeah, so 50 years ago, the average home was about 4 to 5 times the average annual salary, and now I think it's over 8 times. So home ownership is becoming increasingly unaffordable for young people. Fewer people are getting married, fewer people are having kids. They don't have that investment in society that's going to lead them to become more conservative. And given that the government has been screwing them every which way, forcing them to live in their bedrooms for 3 years, not really investing in any of their potential future opportunities, driving them into these universities where they can waste 3 years and spend the rest of their life paying it back in low-wage jobs. It's not really surprising that they don't feel great enthusiasm to vote for Mr. Sunak.
Are you surprised that the Tories have brought this about after 12 years? Because people can say what they like about Mrs. Thatcher, for example, but she was always very keen on home ownership as a pathway to, as she saw it, in the way you put it, having a stake in society and in the future. Are you surprised that we're here in 2022 and we've had 12 years of Tory government and this is what it's come down to?
I think there are 2 factors at play. One is that they're very keen to encourage older voters to keep voting for them. And generally, older voters who do own homes aren't keen for a bunch of new neighbours to set up in the field next door. And also, having this very kind of internationalist attitude towards economics, they're very comfortable with a lot of foreign ownership of UK residential homes, which encourages renting and makes it more difficult for young people living in Britain to own property. So it's definitely against what would be traditional conservative principles, but I think we're way past the point where we can associate the Conservative Party with traditional conservative principles.
Well, just quickly then, I think only 19% of young people voted Conservative at the last election. What do you reckon? Do you think they'll still be able to keep it in double digits next election?
I think they might be able to have 19 voters.
Okay, well, we'll see how that goes. Thank you, Ben. Stay safe in Poland. Watch out for incoming. Not a thing I thought I would have to say in the Europe of 2022, but that's the way it is. Let's have quick stump of things. No woke nations asks, is there such a thing as an illegal immigrant in UK law? No. If you look at the if you look at what the people who like all these incoming Albanians say, that's their point, that there's no such thing as an illegal person. Mark asks, can the UK get out of ECHR? Yes, it has to. And there's no political price to be paid for it. So if your Conservative government can't even do this, then it can't do anything. Get out of the European Court of Human Rights. There's no reason why Azerbaijani jurists, geniuses though they undoubtedly are, should be deciding who gets to come into the UK any more than we should be deciding who gets to go to Azerbaijan. That'll do it. Dan Wootton is here to wallop your Wednesday. What you got, Dan?
Good evening, Mark. Couldn't agree more on the ECHR. And actually, on that note, Lee Anderson, who I think is one of the only Tories prepared to actually say what the public are thinking on the migrant invasion, will be here. And he, again, was very tough on his own government in PMQs today. Plus, two big Trump loyalists, Jason Miller and Rudy Giuliani. What did they think of the Donald's announcement last night?
Say hi to Rudy for me. I love that guy. All coming up with Dad after the weather. Stay safe, stay free.
The Chancellor has a problem. He's got £55 billion to find, and it could soon become your problem too. Tax rises and cuts could be coming, but where will the axe fall? Benefits and pensions, support for energy bills, or social care? To find out what it means for you and your family, the Chancellor's autumn statement, live here on GB News tomorrow from 10 a.m.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as unelected globalist Jeremy Hunt prepares to deliver the budget update from hell tomorrow, are we being ruled by a party that's conservative in name only? And is a true blue counterattack imminent?
If the government has got enough money to proceed with HS2 at any cost, then it has sufficient money not to increase taxes. I, for one, won't support them.
I preview the announcement that could be the nail in the coffin for the Tynos. They are the Tories in name only in my digest next. Then I'll get the views of my superstar panel, Dawn Neeson, Adam Brooks and Narinder Kaur. After this long-awaited announcement in the race for the White House last night.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and my fellow citizens, America's comeback starts right now.
So would a Donald Trump second term be good for the world? His former lawyer and one of his closest advisors, Rudy Giuliani, joins me at 10:20. And I'll get your verdict on this too when former Trump advisor turned Getter CEO Jason Miller and entrepreneur Amy Ansell go head-to-head in the clash at 9:25. Why is Suella Braverman still being bullied just for trying to keep Britain's borders safe? Well, one of Westminster's finest finally had enough of the left's witch hunt today.
Ambitious bullying campaign led by the opposition. Please reassure me and the people of Ashfield that the Home Secretary will be given all the tools that she needs to solve the migrant crisis and keep the bully boys out of number 10.
At 9:30, King of the North Lee Anderson opens up about that extraordinary intervention and why he doesn't care if he's branded a bigot for talking tough on illegal migration. Don't miss him live in the studio. As NHS Scotland fast-tracks irreversible gender surgeries amid Nicola Sturgeon's extreme trans crusades, I'm going to meet a writer and activist, Charlie Bentley Astor, who says she would have killed herself if she had given in to the pressure to transition. Don't miss that important discussion in The Outsider at 9:50. Could Coronation Street's woke storyline